Hi, good evening, everyone. I extend you all a very warm welcome to the sixth webinar series, which is an educational initiative jointly undertaken by Philip Capital and BSC with the sole objective of sharing knowledge and market insights for everyone connected to global markets. My name is Vishaka, and I am a part of FX Advisory Desk at Philip Capital. So, Philip Capital is a Singapore based company established in 1975, having global presence in 15 countries. We have over 1 million clients worldwide with asset under management worldwide more than USD 35 billion. Now at this onset, I would like to thank Mr. Rajendra Sharma from BSc, Dr. Shubhadra Rao and Mr. Vivek Kumar from Quantico Research for sparing their valuable time and for consenting to be a part of this webinar series to share their valuable market insights. Now I would like to invite Mr. Rajendra Sharma, who is the GM Business Development at BSc, to share his part of speech. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Philip Capital, for giving us an opportunity to come forward and actually talk on markets and macros on market. Probably the most esteemed panelists, Shubhdaji and Vivek, will be the right person to give us more gyan on the macro level. But I'll just touch base upon quickly what we have been actually feeling for last almost a year since the outbreak of the COVID, and what we could actually see in this last 1 year has surprised everyone. If you see what we were in March 2020 and what we are in March 2021, no one would have even imagined where the markets would be where they are at this juncture. So it was like completely working from home and everyone was in a panic mode. I mean, the markets were tanking. But as we speak a year before and as we speak today, we are up by almost 75%. So markets are up, and the more and more people are actually getting into markets. So work from home has given an opportunity for new people to get into the market. So till 2020, we would have around 4 crore plus Demat accounts, and in last 11 months, I mean, you'll be surprised to know that we have added 1.36 crore Demat accounts, which is almost what 25-30% of the entire base which we had. And in last 3 months itself, the run rate has been 1.5 million plus. So if you take numbers of December, Jan and Feb, we are at 15 lakhs, 16 lakhs, 17 lakhs accounts opened every month. And considering the size of the country, 130 crore population, we are yet to, I mean, there is a long way to go and we have to catch up. We have to at least have around 10 crore Demat accounts, which probably we should be reaching very soon, or maybe in 3 years down the line, we should be having almost 10 crore Demat accounts. But one thing which we actually experienced in this lockdown, when everyone is pessimistic, there is always an opportunity. And the opportunity came in the way from work from home, where a lot of IT companies got this opportunity to scale it up. And we could see everyone is now, earlier it used to happen that if you don't go to an office for 1 day, I mean, things will go upside down. Today, working from home for almost 7 months, we started in November. We are operating 2 days in a week from office, but starting from April till November, we were working from home and we have done phenomenally. And during this period, BSE has done some immense job. You talk about launches, the new product launches, the options on goods in gold and silver. So the new product innovative. So we are sitting at home and doing innovation of new product which could be the need of the hour. We we are the only exchange in the world which is offering almond contracts. So again, this was an innovation which was offered by BSE sitting at home during this COVID period. And the new accounts opened. So new accounts opened normally it takes up it's a procedure. You have to fill a form, do a KYC, then the entries have to happen. Everything was automated by the members. And CDSL, which is part of BSE subsidiary, actually came out with a process where every KYC was automated in such a way that the account is open in like less than 15 minutes. So all those innovations, all those technology upgrades, which keeps on happening during the normal period, it actually just took off during work from home culture in the COVID era. And now we are almost up 70% from the last year's March low. Where we would be, how the macros will, unfold. We have seen GST numbers of almost 1 lakh crores for last 5 consecutive months. And a lot of new initiatives are taken by the government of India, right from policy initiatives to sell off of PSUs. There is action in the financial capital market. And I mean, the one day you miss the market, I mean, you miss a lot of things. So people just want to actually just listen to what the TV anchors are saying, what is the news in the market. They may or they may not invest, but they just want to know what's happening in the capital market and globally also. India is, I mean, probably Shubhda ji and Vivek will be the right person to actually tell us what actually is happening in the global market. But I'll just say we are in the right place at the right time. India is now going to catch up, and we will be the hot destination for all foreign institutional investors who may want to park money. We are the unique. A lot of startups are coming up from India. We are the second largest startup capital of the world, and BSE is a perfect place where it's a universal exchange, right from equity to equity derivatives to currency to commodities to mutual funds to insurance, you name it, and we are there. The leaders in international exchange in the GIFT City. We are also leading in mutual fund distribution, almost 80% plus market share. We offer the lowest transaction cost, effectively zero when it comes to equity derivatives. Even when it comes to currency, beyond 20,000 crores, absolutely zero transaction charges. So up to 20,000 crores a month, a large member who wants to play around, he ends up only paying at 3 lakh 2,500. So cost effective, speed of execution, and recently we had a technical glitch at other exchange. So all those people who were aligned to BSE were actually happy to execute without even getting into the hurdle of they are stuck, we are not able to execute. So I mean, fortunately, touchwood, we haven't had any technical glitch. So BSE offers everything right from product trading products to distribution products. We are in the capital market. We are actually looking and working on opportunities which are on the products which could be need of the hour. So we are happy to explore with partners, with members, with customers, with bankers, whoever want to come across and just work with us to explore new product which could be the demand from the other side. We are happy to work with them. We can just take it up with the regulator, come out with those innovative products, and actually give it to the market, because we are here to actually see that the market grows and penetration happens. So without taking much of a time, I mean, BSE, everyone knows BSE, everyone knows we are cost effective, everyone knows we are the largest, the fastest with 6 microsecond speed. So I mean, I mean, nothing new which I'll be telling, but only one thing, that post interoperability, members who are not yet geared up or the systems are not ready, they should get their systems ready, because customers in these volatile markets want to exit at times of technical glitch. So even today we are at BSE, someone has a position at BSE, they can exit an NSE if something happens to us. Similar way, if something has happened to NSE last week or 10 days back, they were in a position to exit only for those members who had their systems ready due to interoperability. So please look into those areas, gear up, get the systems ready. Products are available. We are happy to offer new product. We are happy to work with new initiatives, which is required by the market. And I think together, when we are working together with the counterparts, with the members, with the customers, we can give the product which the market demands, rather than we just offering whatever is available. We want people to come forward, tell us this is the product which can actually expand the market. So I think with this, I would just hand over the mic to you, and thank you once again for giving us an opportunity to sit with the esteemed panel like Shubhda ji and Vivek ji, who will actually share their thoughts on the macro market. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So now I would like to invite again Dr. Shubhada Rao and Mr. Vivek Kumar from Quantico Research. Dr. Shubhada Rao is the founder of Quantico, an independent lead research house specializing in delivering business economics and financial market intelligence to corporates and investors. Prior to setting up Quantico, she served as a senior group president and chief economist at Yes Bank. She was responsible for business economics banking, providing macroeconomic research outlook at the bank. Shubhita Madam brings with her over 30 years of experience in academia industry. In the past, she has held various industry association positions such as chairperson of Economics Committee of Bombay Chambers of Commerce and Industry, member of CII National Economic Policy Council, New Delhi, co-chair of the Economics Committee at ASSOCHAM, and member of Monetary Policy Group, India and Banks Association. As a thought leader, she has made extensive presentations on Indian economy to central banks, including Federal Reserve Bank of England, Bank of Canada, and among others. Her views have often been aired on domestic and international electronic and print media like CNBC, ET Now, BBC World, CNN, Bloomberg Asia, and local business dailies. Under her leadership, her team was often ranked among top three forecasters of Indian economic indicators by Bloomberg, and was cited as top forecasters for currency 2016 by Reuters. Also, we have Mr. Vivek Kumar among our panelists. He has joined Quantico Research in November 2020. He holds a master's degree in economics from the Delhi School of Economics and brings over 15 years of rich industry experience in the field of macroeconomics research with focus on financial markets, especially currency, fixed income, and monetary market. Prior to joining Quantico, Mr. Vivek has worked as president and senior economist at Yes Bank. His earlier stints included the role of treasury economist at ICICI Bank and research associate at Progeno. Shubhita madam, I would like to take you over with your part of PPT. Thank you, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Vishakha. Thank you, Philip Capital and BSE, for getting us to share what we think of the economy going forward and what a 12-month period has it been. Right from introduction of stringent lockdown to completely. Is this looking okay? The screen, Vishakha?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Or should I go to the slide format?
Yeah, ma'am. You can. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes.
If this works, yeah. Without much ado, we have a lot of ground to cover. As I said, what a 12-month time zone it has been, from looking and witnessing a kind of once a 100-year phenomenon, or should I say crisis, led essentially by public health crisis. We have seen, in response to mitigating and tackling this crisis, an unprecedented response coming from all the world economy, the G5, particularly central banks. The fiscal stimulus, the monetary stimulus has been absolutely unprecedented to the scale that post global financial crisis, the balance sheet, the way they grew over the next 5 or 6 years, that is the kind of stimulus we saw in just 1 year post the COVID pandemic. So that is the scale of response that the global economy came up with to deal with this unforeseen and unprecedented health crisis. As a result of which, what we have seen over the first quarter to going into the next 2 or 3 quarters globally has been evident signs of recovery taking shape. Most of the economies have pronounced their recovery to be taking a shape of a V, but in many of the developing markets, developing economies, it hasn't been a very smooth V-shaped recovery. What I would like to label it as, it's a K within a V that we have had in many of the developing markets. Some of the multi-speed recovery process between different sectors of the world economy and closer home in India. Alongside the recovery process, where the world is expected to grow, as per IMF estimates, close to about 3.5%, 4%. US is more importantly expected to grow upward to 5%. I think that is the speed with which 2 or 3 factors, gave that confidence. One was, of course, the stimulus by itself, but more importantly, the impact of the vaccine rollout that we have seen, particularly since December and Jan, has brought immense confidence in the path of recovery and, more importantly, the speed of recovery across the globe. No doubt that US has taken a lead in terms of the vaccine rollout and the number of people getting inoculated, but not too far behind are many other developed nations and some of the developing economies, which of course, as a share in terms of total population, have a catch up to do. By the sheer numbers, however, most of the economies, including India, are trying to make rapid strides in inoculating as many people as they can within a couple of quarters. So that is what gives immense confidence for this economic recovery to take shape. Along with the economic recovery, have emerged some of the risks which are typically concomitant to a recovery process of this scale, where we were looking at a sharp contraction in 2020, and in 2021 we're actually looking at equal and a stronger bounce back to a significant positive territory for growth across the world, led by US and a lot of Asian economies, including India. I will come to that where we are looking at as far as India's growth is concerned. The concomitant risks come from the immediate return of commodity price trajectory. We have seen crude oil prices, we have seen the industrial metal prices. All of these, the CRB index as we call it, has seen a huge recovery in terms of 40 to 50% recovery to pre-COVID levels, and that is where we see a risk that a commodity inflation could start impinging on some of the growth path going forward. Alongside that, fed by commodity prices is the broad overall inflation risk. Inflation expectations have been rising because as more and more people get inoculated, the risk appetite amongst the consumers, amongst the investors is set to rise, and that has begun to give rise to an expectation of a strong demand-led recovery across the world. And with this demand recovery is also an expectation of inflation rising, because as the demand gets restored world over, we are going to see the pricing power return to the manufacturers, and that is expected to translate into inflationary pressures across the global economy. So while we are extremely enthused about the growth prospects, we cannot ignore some of the risks that we need to take into cognizance and take on board while we project our growth outlook for the world, for the US economy, and more importantly, closer home for India. The vaccine rollout, as I said, has been in multi-speed. US has led significantly in terms of the coverage of vaccine. In India, it's still lagging behind, but we hope that the couple of quarters going forward, we will see a rapid coverage in terms of inoculation. And that gives us confidence to look at the growth that we projected as early as in December at Quantico, that India is set to grow basis the vaccine rollout by almost 11.5% going into the fiscal 22. The reason being that while the stringent lockdown started to get phased out post the first quarter, the manufacturing sector started to respond and has shown a stronger rebound and stronger resilience getting demonstrated over the last few months. As Rajendra was also pointing out, that if you look at high frequency indicators, we've seen GST collections, we have seen volume indicators, be it on freight, be it on industrial output, most of them coming to pre-COVID levels, including that of trade. So high frequency indicators are looking at a very strong rebound, getting penciled in for India, as I said, at 11.5% growth. But what brings us that extra confidence is also that as we see contact intense sectors also getting better in terms of risk appetite and risk sentiment, then we will see a sharper and stronger rebound in the services sector, which India really leans on. You've seen sectors like trade, hospitality, aviation, all of these still being laggards. But as the vaccine rollout progresses, we will see a much stronger rebound, particularly in the second half of fiscal 22, which gives us a confidence of 11.5% growth for the India's growth trajectory. What happens to the interest rates and currency, which I will leave my colleague Vivek to cover a lot on this ground. But importantly, as we spoke about the global risks, in India too, we being importing our crude oil imports, the prices have nudged right up to 60, 65 handle from as low as $20 a barrel. We need to keep in mind the impact of those crude prices feeding into our domestic inflation trajectory. And what happens when inflation expectations in India also stay elevated? Obviously, the Central Bank of India, that is the Reserve Bank, is likely to keep those inflation expectations in mind. And as growth starts to normalize, particularly in the second half of the fiscal year, we could see the Reserve Bank of India normalizing some of the excess liquidity, while the domestic liquidity will be kept positive and in a fairly sizable surplus, but the glut in liquidity surplus may get pruned, and that is what we anticipate RBI to particularly going into the second half. As far as interest rate falls is concerned, I would, allow Vivek to, share the whole presentation with you and our rationale of why we believe what we believe from the central bank action, and more importantly, the concerns that come from in terms of what happens to the rupee dollar move, and that where we will have a number of factors, both domestic factors in terms of the growth inflation mix, and more importantly, the global factors emanating from the DXY, where the US economy perhaps running much ahead of the other developed economies, and therefore, in its turn, what does happen to the dollar index, and that in turn, how does it impinge on the USD INR exchange rate? So altogether, there are multiple factors, the pull and push factors, which are going to be, assessed and monitored month to month to allow us to navigate through this yet turbulent and uncertain time that we are in. But suffice to say that the deepest point of concerns, the deepest expectations of troughs are behind us. And more importantly, now we are looking at normalizing the growth with minimal accidents in form of runaway inflation risks or runaway commodity prices risks, or for that matter, taper tantrum kind of risks. So over the next 25 minutes, Vivek is going to take you through what in nutshell have I presented. We look at growth very promisingly for India, as I said, and the government policies have been extremely supportive for not just near-term growth impulses, but importantly, embedding the medium-term growth factors and environment, particularly being led by schemes like a PLI and financial sector reforms. And I think that gives us a larger confidence to take India back to its normalized potential growth. On this note, over to you, Vivek. I'll navigate the presentation for you.
Thank you, Subha. Thanks, PhillipCapital and BSE, especially Rajendra ji, who has been extremely kind with respect to us. So, taking a lead from where Shubha left, and looking at how things have panned out on the markets front, especially in the last 2 or 3 months, it seems like there has been a flurry of activity globally. And strangely, our markets doesn't seem to have had that kind of a reaction as of yet. So bond markets, yes, you can argue that yields have hardened by nearly 20, 30 basis points this year, but that's largely because of the budget surprise on the borrowing front. Rupee has by and large remained stable around 73. If I look at the equity indices, the BSE 500 would be somewhere close to 10% on a calendar year basis up. So our markets are doing roughly okay, despite the turbulence that we are seeing globally. So why is this flurry of activity happening on the global markets front? Well, I guess the moot point here is that there is a lot of repricing happening as far as expectations on growth is concerned, expectation on inflation is concerned. And to our understanding, this probably is more a behavioral aspect because, in the pandemic year when forecasts were made, the forecast typically, when you make a forecast at the bottom of the cycle, it typically tends to be extremely on the negative side. You tend to overestimate the drawdown on growth, the impact on inflation. and you also tend to underestimate the recovery that is likely to happen. So that is something which probably is currently being unfolding on the global markets front. So V-shaped recovery, yes, there is an expectation that probably the recovery would be faster than what the market is or some of the agencies have been expecting. So, about a month back, there was an expectation that US will grow at 5% in terms of GDP in 2021. Looking at the size of the second stimulus package, which has been announced recently, I guess the $1.9 trillion by the Biden administration, and looking at some of the facts that the US economy in Q4 as well as in Q1 seems to be doing pretty well. The markets are now penciling in a possibility of a 6% GDP growth. And alongside this, the expectation is that inflation, which the Fed also is now much more comfortable with in terms of letting it go above 2%, will probably lie somewhere between 2.5 to 3% range as far as the CPI is concerned, not the core PCE. So this repricing of expectation is having an impact globally and more importantly on the US market front. But I think on the policy side, the monetary policy backdrop continues to be extremely accommodative globally. Most of the central banks have reiterated it many times in the last 1 year that the interest rate component, the actual nominal monetary policy rate, is unlikely to move in the year 2021, also in the year 2022 for most of the countries. So just think about it. The advanced economies, they are currently maintaining their monetary policy rate at close to rock bottom levels, negative in some cases, and it is likely to persist in 2021 as well as in 2022 in most cases. So that is an assurance which has been reiterated umpteen times in the last 1 year. I think most importantly, what is also of critical importance to markets is the supply of liquidity. So the central banks extended their balance sheet support. They started buying bonds. They started buying money market assets in some cases. And in this process of quantitative easing, they infused great amount of liquidity. So this liquidity that the central banks have been infusing so far is nearly 7 times magnitude of what was done in the post-global financial crisis period. So that's the extent of delta that we are seeing, and that's the extent of delta in liquidity, which is actually supporting asset markets globally, starting from equities to commodities to fixed income markets, at least till the year 2020. So this backdrop is continuing. And within this backdrop, the recovery that we are seeing globally has a very important characteristic of the fact that it is being led by manufacturing and the fact that it is being led by trade activities. So services, yes, they have recovered from where they were 6 or 9 months ago, but vis-a-vis manufacturing and vis-a-vis trade, services still are in a negative territory. So I'm not talking about India here. We are talking about the global economy as such. And most of the contact intensive services are still in the contraction phase, although yes, they have recovered from their lows in 2020. But clearly on the manufacturing front and on the trade front, the recovery has been extremely sharp to the extent that both manufacturing and trade activities, so we are talking about the real activity here, manufacturing production as well as trade volumes, are now above their pre-pandemic levels by the, I think this data is as of December. So as of December, both manufacturing, global manufacturing on the industrial side, as well as international trade, exports and imports on the volume front, the December data for 2020 is actually greater in real activity terms vis-a-vis December of 2019. So that's a big comfort. And so yes, so there are economics, there are no free lunches as we are told. And this repricing of expectation is getting reflected on the commodity side. Your food prices are up, your metal prices are up, your, most importantly, fuel prices are up. So all three put together, the consolidated commodity basket would be upwards of nearly 50 to 55% on an annualized basis in the month of March this year. So that there is a huge run up if you compare it on a year-on-year basis, because unfortunately, CPI or in any other country, if you're looking at a wholesale level inflation is always computed on a year-on-year basis, and this will feed into inflation expectations globally. What is also happening on the sideline, and which is also equally important, which is not on the economics front, but which is on the medical front, is the progress on vaccination. And it is fortunate that we've received, or at least the humanity has got the vaccine in such a short span of time. Typically, it takes about nothing less than 4 to 5 years to develop a vaccine. But in case of COVID, we've seen that happening within less than a year. So starting December, most of the advanced economies, most of the advanced countries, they started on with the vaccination drive. Uh, so far, the global population has seen nearly 2.3 percentage points of population being covered as far as at least the first dose of COVID vaccine is concerned. More importantly, in case of US, uh, okay, so I guess I'll probably share my screen here because
Is there a lag? Sorry to disrupt, but is there a lag? Because I've been changing the slides. But probably it's
Um,
not getting reflected, Vishakha.
yes, ma'am. We can still see the first slide.
Oh, because I have been changing the slides
Oh
regularly.
no.
So probably it's not getting shared in the presentation. I'm sorry.
so
Yes,
let
ma'am.
so let me do it at my end if
Yeah.
that's okay.
No, no, that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
I thought there was a lag, but obviously it's not getting reflected there. We are on slide 6, Vivek.
Yes. So is the screen visible now?
Vishaka, is the screen visible?
I think we can still see your screen, ma'am.
Still my
Okay.
screen? Okay, let me just
If you could just
let me stop share. I'll stop sharing my screen. Vivek, now you can share the screen.
yes, we're able to see this.
You can maximize the screen, Vivek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So on US front, we've seen rapid progress in terms of vaccination. Nearly 17.5% of the population is already vaccinated, vis-a-vis 2.5% globally. So that's a clear head start, and that gap vis-a-vis rest of the globe is actually increasing. If you see, looking at the way US authorities have indicated, it looks like by the end of June they'll be ending up close to half of the population getting the at least the first dose of COVID vaccine. So both policy, the activity, and the vaccination, all these three things are happening together. And this is, as I said, getting reflected in commodity prices. This is getting reflected in inflation expectations, especially in case of US, which is now at a decade high. So this is the root of the turbulence globally. Inflation expectations hardening significantly in the last 3 months, and because of which your 10-year yields have moved up by nearly 65 basis points on a calendar year basis. And if you see how other markets in US have reacted, well, they have not yet seen the jitters. Well, yet they have gotten a little bit cautious. So S&P is roughly 1.5% up on a calendar year basis, whereas the dollar index is roughly 2.5% up on a calendar year basis. So bulk of the reaction in market uh, is still pertaining to the rates market. And if this were to persist further, then I guess the spillovers will start getting reflected very soon in other markets. What is the outlook as far this is what has happened recently? What is the outlook at least for the next 2 or 4 quarters? Well, here what we notice is that US stands out in terms of its reflationary policy support, not just on the monetary policy side, but also on the fiscal policy side. And within the fiscal policy space, it is very interesting to note that while all the major countries in the world, they did administer significant amount of fiscal policy support, significant amount of fiscal stimulus to whatever extent was possible in every country in the year 2020. In the year 2021, all those countries have started to scale back. So it's not that fiscal policy has turned tight suddenly. It is still expansionary, but the incrementally the extent is getting curtailed, except in case of US. So US is probably the only major economy which will see an increase in fiscal deficit not only in terms of dollars but also in terms of the ratio to GDP. So that is one thing to note. The other thing to note in case of US is the money supply. The money supply in case of US is running at nearly 27-28% annualized basis. That is a clear record high, never in the history of the US, not even in case of the global financial crisis when the entire quantitative easing was introduced by the Federal Reserve as a notion to ease policy. Not even, I mean, it's the gap between what was the money supply in the global financial crisis and what it is now is humongous. With in the context of the expectation of nearly 5.5-6% GDP growth, if you juxtapose this, what is happening on the fiscal policy front and what is happening on the money supply front, I guess it is very natural for commodities and very natural for bonds to have reacted in the manner in which they have in the last 3 months. So what can it possibly do to the dollar? As I said, the reaction in case of FX market has been not as much. So we looked back in case of what has happened in 2008-2009 period during the past recessionary episode, and we saw that US 10-year or the yield, the long-term yield, and the relationship between long-term yield and the dollar is not very tenable. It's not a very clear-cut relationship. So in theory, you would expect higher yields to benefit the currency, but in the actual experience, that has not been the case always. Yes, there has been a mild relationship with respect to what has happened on the real interest rate front and the FX. So if that mild relationship were to hold for the reflation period, which is, so I would correspond the year 2021 to 2010 of the global financial crisis period. So that would correspond to the reflation period. And in this reflation period, we saw a very mild positive relationship between real interest rates at the long end and the FX. So this can possibly, if it were to continue, if you were to juxtapose this in the current environment, then this can start providing a little bit of support to the US dollar. But what we feel is that more importantly, the vaccination story is something which is putting US in a clear different league altogether. If you look at the dollar index basket, the dollar index basket has 6 different currencies: euro, JPY, yen, pound, Canadian dollars, Swedish krona, and the Swiss franc. And if you look at how these 6 countries are doing, or how these 6 economies are doing as far as vaccination is concerned, the weighted average comes down to nearly 8.5%. And this, in comparison to US vaccination currently, stands at nearly half of where US is. So again, not only with respect to rest of the globe, even with respect to the dollar index, US pace of vaccination is nearly double of what the immediate peers are currently acknowledging. Within the DXY basket, it is only GBP, the pound, the UK, which is managing a faster run rate of nearly 33% population getting covered as far as the vaccination is concerned. But the basket as a whole is half of where US is currently. So this is a clear positive for the dollar. Even I would say put it above the interest rate argument, which theoretically seems to be much more attractive. So that's on the on what can possibly support the US dollar. What could possibly weigh on the US dollar is the fact that the trade deficit is extremely high. And again, like FISC, US is probably the only country in the world that in the pandemic year actually had a deterioration in its trade deficit. So all typically in a recession period, you would expect countries which run a current account surplus or a trade surplus to see a lower surplus. Countries which run a current account deficit or a trade deficit to run a lower deficit. So we saw that happening in 2020 for almost every country in the world except for US. US actually had a higher deficit in 2020, and not only higher deficit, it is actually a record high deficit. So all that stimulus coming from monetary policy, all that stimulus coming from fiscal policy is getting reflected on your trade account. And this will eventually have a way upon the US dollar. The other reason why we would expect dollar to be fundamentally weak is the valuation. US dollar has been correcting as far as the overvaluation is concerned, and the peak that we saw was in March 2020. Since then, the correction is progressing. As of date, they are about the US dollar index is about 3 to 3.5% overvalued. So there is still some room for correction. In fact, when the correction starts, it is typically a cyclical movement. It does not end at zero. It will probably overshoot on the other direction, and the US dollar could go to an undervalued territory in the medium term. So this is on the valuation front, and so where do we see the dollar? Well, we would expect the dollar to be caught in this cross current of factors like vaccination and factors like real interest rates pulling it up, and the more fundamental factors like the trade account or the trade deficit, deterioration in trade deficit, and valuation pulling it lower. So net, we would expect dollar to be weaker, but not as much as what we were expecting it to be 6 months back. So if 6 months back we were expecting dollar index to be at 85 by the end of 2021, now we are expecting it to be close to 89. And the current levels would be around 92. So we would expect it to weaken, but not as much as what the expectation was 6 months back. I think the key here to note is that on the US yield, we would not be surprised if on the 10-year benchmark you see a 2% print. And this 2% print would actually not be very surprising because pre-pandemic levels, the US 10-year yields were very close to that. So in some way, you've got to see this as an act of normalization. If the economy is normalizing, then every other bit associated with the financial markets will also normalize. So where does it lead to Indian markets? So I guess Indian markets, as I said, has been pretty stable as far as the FX bit is concerned. And even on the bond bit, barring the negative surprise that came on the supply front, I think markets are taking comfort on the growth aspect for India. As Shubha highlighted earlier, 11.3% is what we expect on GDP, and that is a record high for India. It is not only a double-digit number, it is a record high number for India as far as GDP growth is concerned. So this is a clear positive. There are structures being put in place by the government in terms of reforms. The PLI scheme stands out. The labor and the farm reforms that the government has done in the last 3 months. And the other important bit, which actually happened before the pandemic, was the cut in the corporate tax rate. That also was a landmark move by the government. It's just that it got overshadowed by COVID. So some of these things have been put in place, and hopefully with the kind of stimulative environment that the global economy is posing, India will probably continue to keep pace with that kind of growth momentum. I would completely agree with Rajendra ji also on this. But at the same time, while yes, there is a clear reason to be optimistic on India's growth prospects, we also need to be mindful of certain things. The banking sector asset quality is one of the most important concern areas for us. As far as RBI's own projections for the gross NPA ratio is concerned, they are stimulating it at roughly 13.5% from 7.5%. So roughly they are expecting the GNPA ratio to become double between September 2020 and September 2021. So this probably will act as a deterrent for runaway or at least sustained increase in growth momentum going forward. It does not. So the thing that I would like to point out here is that it is an estimate. It is an estimate basis business as usual scenario. And the estimate can actually be different from the business as usual scenario if corrective policy measures are being undertaken. So the government were to, let's say, egg the public sector banks to go and raise capital, or if the growth momentum is actually much stronger than what we are expecting at 11.3%. So some of these ratios will change. And the hope is that they could actually change and change on the lower side than change on the upper side. But nevertheless, it is one source of concern that we would like to highlight. Inflation is probably going to be comfortable going into the next financial year. And if we were to ignore where commodity prices are currently, the average inflation would probably be somewhere close to 4 quarter in FY22. But just because commodity prices have moved up rapidly in the last 3 months, and at least in the next 2 or 3 months, it doesn't look like it is going to give you any respite. We are forecasting an average inflation of 5%. So 5% inflation is still lower than where we are currently. We are close to 6.2, 6.3% on an average basis for this year. So there is a moderation in inflation if you were to look at it from an annual perspective. But if you were to look at it from where things were 6 months back and where things are right now, then inflation expectations have moved up in case of India. So it depends how you are judging this situation. On an annual basis, inflation will moderate. But vis-a-vis expectations 6 months back, inflation is moving up in case of India. What does it leave for the RBI? Well, RBI has already indicated that they want to normalize things, and they have taken the first step with respect to liquidity by announcing variable reverse repo auctions. They have also announced their intent to hike CRR. The announcement has already been made. The implementation will happen in late March and in the month of May 2021. 50 basis point hike will get restored in March and 50 basis point will get restored in May. So there is a clear intent to normalize liquidity conditions. We expect that the kind of growth numbers that India will probably churn out, it will become incumbent upon the RBI to start normalizing interest rates also. And the modicum or the modus operandi for that would probably start with the reverse repo rate than the repo rate. So we would expect RBI to first touch the reverse repo rate and restore the policy corridor to 25 basis points. Now, in the COVID times, as an act of providing emergency relief, RBI had widened the corridor between repo and reverse repo rate. The current level of reverse repo stands at 3.35%, repo is at 4%. So RBI would first want to restore that width of the corridor, take reverse repo rate to 3.75%. We would expect that to happen before the end of the calendar year 2021. And the final step in the process of normalization would be a hike in the repo rate. We expect that to happen in February of 2022. So it's still about 12 months period, but that is the road that we see for the RBI to follow. The first step has already been taken. The next step will probably be will be coming forth from the RBI in the next 2 or 3 quarters. What about the bond market? Are they throwing a tantrum? There is a lot of media attention on what the bond markets in India have been doing. The RBI has coming out very often these days in terms of communicating what they want to signal, or how the bond market should be reading the signals from the central bank. Well, I guess the bond markets are doing what they know best when there is a flurry of supply. And also, to give you a background on inflation was not really helping them in the entire course of 2020. Inflation was pretty high, not only above the 4% target, it was actually in some cases above the threshold for tolerance, which happens to be 6%. So while inflation was at one end, not giving you comfort, the other end was the deluge of supply, which came from both the central government papers as well as the state government papers. Now, if you look at the FY21 figures, they are double of what the borrowing numbers are for FY20. And in a short span of 12 months, when you know that one of the active participants in the markets, which is the foreign portfolio investors, they are completely away from Indian debt markets. So this kind of supply in an inflationary environment will not get absorbed by the markets. And the bond markets are pretty natural in the manner in which they have reacted. So yields have hardened, and we would expect yields to harden more. The 10-year to move towards 6.5% before the end of the financial year 2021-22, And this will happen not only because there is a deluge of supply. Well, despite RBI, participating with respect to open market operations, buying bonds intermittently, the governor has said that they bought in close to 3 trillion rupees of bonds in the current financial year. And he has also said that there is no reason to expect that this number would be lower next year. So, which means that they are roughly working with a 3 trillion rupee estimate of OMO even for next year. But looking at the supply situation, looking at the fact that FPIs are absent from the market, looking at the expectation of growth recovery, which means that banks will have a tendency to reduce their excess SLR holding, the scenario does not look extremely comforting. And if you put the global rates environment in this entire equation, the uh, the comfort level drops even further. So 6.5 is what we expect, and that's not much looking at where the yields are currently. So they've already risen by more than 25, 30 basis points. So it's a matter of another 25, 30 basis points. And what about rupee? Well, rupee has been very well behaved, extremely well behaved in last year, and in the first 2 months of this year, the rupee has been equally well behaved. So, which means that the volatility that the currency typically sees is extremely subdued. In fact, we have noticed that the volatility is now lower than its long-term trend. A few macro reasons why it is happening, as I earlier said, the growth prospects are extremely encouraging, and a high growth environment is typically rupee supportive. But at the same time, there are equations on the FX front which are changing, and it is primarily emerging from two factors. One is commodities. So commodity prices are moving up. So your trade has started to normalize. Deficit has once again returned to where it was 2 years ago. So roughly 14 to 15 billion dollars on a monthly basis, we are clocking the trade deficit, and this was the level of deficit 2 years ago. So we are normalizing fast on trade. We are normalizing fast on activity front. So which means that your current account position will be the deficit would be larger than what we were expecting 6 months ago. 6 months ago, we were expecting a $30 billion of deficit of current account in FY22 from a surplus situation in FY21. Now in FY22, now taking so we haven't done estimates for taking into account where what will happen if crude were to stay at 65 or 70. But a back of the envelope calculation suggests that it could easily be close to $50 billion of deficit. So will it be something which is extremely negative for rupee? Well, it will not be negative for rupee because uh, it would still get funded easily through FDI. It would still get funded easily through ECB. There is NRI deposits also. So net net, it would still generate a balance of payment surplus. But what will change in the interim is the basic balance of payment. So basic balance of payment is your current account deficit plus your FDI, which is more durable funding of your current account deficit. That could very well turn negative. So if we are talking about a $50 billion deficit on the current account, and if the FDI remains in the 45, $50 billion range, then you could end up being in a slight negative basic balance of payment scenario, which essentially means that you would be vulnerable to what is happening on the portfolio front. So essentially, portfolio flows are typically much more volatile than FDI flows. And in an environment of rising US interest rates, in an environment of, let's say, the possibility of the Federal Reserve doing a taper, maybe 4 quarters down the line or 5 quarters down the line, they could continue to remain volatile. So, which means that rupee can come under pressure from this side. Rupee could also come under pressure because simply between what is happening bilaterally between US and India as far as vaccination is concerned. US not only had a head start, the incremental progress in case of US is also pretty fast vis-a-vis India. So India has just about 1.2% of its population being vaccinated so far. US is 17.6%. So the gap is expanding, is widening in favor of the dollar. So the relative vaccination premium, if I can put it, is clearly in favor of dollar than INR. So putting all these things together, we would expect dollar rupee to move in the 70 to 76 range in FY22. And the possibility of a depreciation will be more backloaded than front-loaded, which means 76 is more of a possibility later in the year than earlier in the year. And we would still expect it to be an orderly year, not something that we saw in the year 2013 when the taper tantrum actually happened. That time, the India macros were in an extremely bad shape. Growth was close to 4%. Current account deficit was running at $80-85 billion deficit, and your inflation was in close to double-digit terrain. So all these things are much better now, and most importantly, your foreign exchange reserves are now standing close to $600 billion. So even let's say if the Federal Reserve were to do a taper, the RBI is in a much more comfortable position to deploy $50 billion or $60 billion easily than it was in 2013 to protect rupee from extreme amount of volatility on the depreciation side. So rupee would be range bound, slightly having a depreciation bias, and this has more to do with what is happening globally. So I think that is where we would like to end, and this leaves us open to question and answer session.
Thank
Great,
you
sir.
so
Thank you very much. I think it's a full justice to the session, a very comprehensive and informative session, sir. We have many questions. I will filter out few of them which are valid and post it to you. The first question is now RBI supportive of growth vis-a-vis inflation control? Because earlier the mandate of RBI was purely on inflation control, but now they are mentioning growth as well. So is there a change in their stance?
Shubhda, you want to take that up?
Yeah, I think insofar as we still need to ensure that the growth is getting more durable, I think RBI would continue to lean on growth in its monetary policy stance. But once things normalize and once we see a virtuous cycle of growth, being led by investments, which could happen maybe 2 or 3 quarters down the line, I think that even the RBI stance will start normalizing, and once again, it would be watchful of inflation, and inflation could then take the lead in its guidance versus growth. But at this point, there is a need from the central bank to nurture growth. It is far too premature for RBI to take its eyes off growth currently, because if you don't have growth, you have other macroeconomic stability issues. And that is what any central bank would want to avoid. And that is the reason we believe that at least a couple of more policies, RBI would continue to have growth preceding inflation in terms of its kind of monetary policy guidance factor.
Okay, great. Ma'am, another question is bond markets are not having too much faith in the dovish rhetoric by the Fed. So will the Fed will have to resort to yield curve control measures if the rising yield keeps on beating the expectations?
Any central bank first talks down or talks up the sentiment. And what we are currently seeing is the sharp and very quick rise in US yields that we have witnessed is being tackled by commentary, obviously. For example, Yellen was talking more on, let's focus on growth and not on inflation. And the stimulus is more for growth and so on and so forth. So at this point in time, definitely the central banks will try to talk down the concerns. But then markets would, clearly look at the speed with which things on the real economy front are normalizing, the jobs are getting created, and if commodities are also on the rising spree, and if indeed there are signs of durable growth even in the US economy, then the whole thing is for the central bank to navigate carefully and avoid any of those 2013 kind of repeat scenarios. Vivek, would you like to add anything there?
So I would agree with that completely. And so there is a challenge which I guess every central bank in the world would be facing at this point in time. There is an issue of growth and there is an issue of inflation, and there is the concern on what the bond markets are doing. So clearly, every central bank in the world is focusing on growth. if you see where look at where inflation is currently in US and look at where inflation currently is in India, it will give you a clear signal that inflation, at least in the current environment, is getting ignored. And there is a clear focus on prioritizing growth. And there are reasons for doing it, as Shubha said. Now, the fact is that how do you read it? Well, the bond markets are correct in some extent that there is a repricing of what activity levels are going to be, and which the U.S. Treasury Secretary has highlighted very well. That to a large extent, this also reflects the expectation that growth will improve. Now, guess what the Fed can do at this point in time if they want to avert this kind of a runaway movement is keep on reiterating the interest rate argument. I guess nobody doubts that Fed is going to maintain rates at rock bottom levels for 2021 and possibly even 2022. It is the tapering part which is creating the concern. So what if Fed decides to cut down on 120 billion monthly purchase of bonds? So this is where I guess the communication has to come. So to be fair to them, they have been communicating this even well, that the monthly pace of purchases will continue to remain intact. The flip side, which some of the Fed governors have chosen to highlight, is that if financial conditions tighten too much, so nearly 65 basis point of up move in a short span of 2 months, if that were to start having an impact on the real economy, which it will have an impact. So there is a close correlation with, let's say, yield movement and the mortgage rates. Mortgage rates start moving up, the housing market will start to feel the pinch. So if financial conditions do tighten meaningfully, then the expected normalizing of, let's say, quantitative easing or even the interest rate part will get delayed. So that's another way of Fed saying that, look, if you run up too much, the path that we are foreseeing will only get delayed. So that can possibly put brakes to where the markets are at this point in time.
Okay. So, sir, one more related question. The recently passed 1.9 trillion stimulus, will it trigger inflation in US? And could inflation cross 2%, say, in 1 or 2 months? And another question is, if that happens, when do you see Fed increasing its rates? Even though they're mentioning 2023, is there a scene where we see it happening much sooner than what they are quoting?
I think it's easier to say when they won't than when they would. So 2021 ruled out completely. 2022, at least the first three quarters, completely ruled out. So even if, let's say, there is a possibility of rates moving up, I think not before the last quarter of 2022. And that is, again, I'm taking a bet that I'm going against the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve has said that any rate increase will only happen in 2023. So what we can consider here is, even if there is a slight room, that cannot happen possibly before the last quarter of 2022. As far as the inflation point is concerned, and the fiscal stimulus, the 1.9 trillion, the new package which is getting voted in the US as we speak. So this can have a little bit of inflationary impact, because as we highlighted, US is probably the only country in the world which has seen its twin deficits, both fiscal as well as trade deficit, deteriorate or will deteriorate in 2021. This will have some bit of inflationary consequence. The hope is that, I mean, the reason why we are saying is that because, simultaneously the activity of vaccination is progressing. So it's not just that, there is inflation consequence of monetary policy or inflation consequence of fiscal policy. I guess you've got to see it in the context of what vaccination is doing. So vaccination is a confidence booster. Vaccination will lead to higher levels of activity, irrespective of what monetary policy and fiscal policy are doing.
Real economic activity will expand, and that should take some bit of pressure off the inflation.
Yes. So in terms of levels, whether it will cross 2%, on course inflation bit, probably it can get closer to 2%. As far as the headline inflation is concerned, it will be upwards of 2.5%. And if I can give you a range, it can possibly be in the 2.5-3% range as far as the headline CPI is concerned. But Fed looks at core, and core could somewhere be closer to 2%. So, which is also desirable because the Fed wants to push core inflation closer to 2%, in fact, even a little bit higher than 2% for their average inflation targeting to work.
Okay. And so the next question is, the PE of Sensex is around 35 and above. So would you consider the market currently attractive? And do you fear a pullout of funds by FII, considering the PE is so high and the market is so heated?
I think I will not even consider attempting this in the presence of Rajendra ji.
No, it's a wrong question to ask the economists, but on a lighter note. But on a serious note, I think it's going to be a mix of a valuation story plus growth prospect story going forward. And while most of the analysts, and I can take pride in saying that we led the pack by forecasting a double-digit growth number for fiscal 22. And most of the analysts have adjusted their growth forecasts into fairly strong double-digit numbers. So clearly, some of the government facilitation and reforms, no doubt, many of these are medium-term kind of manifestations. But I think there is a certain degree of confidence coming back into the economy, coming back into the manufacturing sector. And as we said, even the services sector is expected to bounce back fairly strongly in the second half as we see a larger coverage of vaccine rollout and inoculation. So it would be a mix that, yes, have the valuations run up, but I would think that it could also be that how further from here on that we look at growth improving. Is it going to surprise us significantly more than 11%? Perhaps. So to that extent, it will get, tuned, if I may add the word.
Okay.
But that's about it with the economist take on the PE story.
Okay, great. And ma'am, I think this is the last question which I'll take. The way the massive liquidity has been infused by the central bankers globally, do you think we are entering into a higher inflation going forward, maybe a hyperinflation? And even though the growth is looking to be very premature and fragile, will this hyperinflation kill that growth which is sustaining?
I think it's a double-edged sword. I personally do not think it's going to be a hyperinflation story, because let's not forget that all the stimulus is this time around, perhaps globally and closer home in India, is being used and deployed to get the supply side of story also up and running. So while in India maybe we have a capacity utilization still subpar, and we have another couple of quarters to see it reach a level where it triggers the fresh broad-based investment cycle. But that probably could be a story globally as well, that as recovery takes shape, you will see supply side of the economy also take root, and to some extent definitely that would restrain the runaway inflation that we may see. But yes, the quantum of the stimulus is so humongous that it has definitely fed into asset price inflation across the classes. But I think it's a thing that we would wait and watch. But I would want to stick my neck out and say that probably it will not reach the hyperinflation kind of phenomenon.
Okay,
Because it
great.
would have its own negative spiraling. If there's a hyperinflation, demand will get slower, and so on and so forth. So I would not think that is a most likely scenario to play out.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, ma'am. Vishaka, I think I'm done with the questions. You can just extend the word of thanks to ma'am and Mr. Vivek.
Yes. Thank you so much, Shubhata madam and Vivek sir. It was a very comprehensive and exhaustive discussion covering all the aspects of the subject. And I'm sure that all the participants would be taking along with an immense amount of knowledge, wisdom, and experience obtained from your discussion. I would also like to thank Mr. Rajendra Sharma from DSC and all the participants for joining today's webinar. For any other queries, you may contact us. Our coordinates are there on the screen. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Vishaka. Thank you, Murtaza.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajendra. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice meeting you, Rajendra.
Same here, ma'am. Hope to catch up with you soon.
Sure, definitely.
Thanks, Vishaka.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Muzza. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.